key to the Indian identity is, can you identify yourself with a specific Indian community? And that's always been the criteria. If you can go to Hope Villa, if you're a Hopi, and say, yeah, we remember his family, then that's authentication. This works for almost all the tribes.
Before modern tribal governments, before the IRA, how did American Indians determine membership?
Well, it's a very complex thing. If you went far back to the beginning of the 19th century, you find clear patterns of adoption, intermarriage, and casual relationships, I guess you'd say, that raise all kinds of questions about who is a member of the tribe. And at that point, the government quite often in treaties will say that anyone half-blood or below should take the allotment of land and not be tribal members. And that's finally opposed by some of the tribes because the chiefs now have grandchildren who are mixed blood, and they want them to be part of the tribe so they can get annuities. And so from that starting point, then you move forward. And there's two ways to keep track of tribal membership. It's the people that the tribe accepts as members, who are usually relatives of people who continue to live in a tribal way. The other is, in making out annuity rolls, the government will recognize certain classes of people as Indians, and then they will arbitrarily say that a certain blood percentage in a tribe makes you non-Indian and not an Indian. So going up in the 1890s to about 1920, when you're doing allotments, people want to trace back to someone that's either on the annuity roll or was recognized for allotments. And so it's a real mess by the time you get to 1900, that there are all kinds of criteria being used, but often the criteria depends on the treaty or agreement that the tribe has with the government. So you come to IRA, and those IRA rolls are the Bureau and the tribe's best effort to determine what membership is so people can vote on constitutions. Sometimes they have the blood quantum, sometimes they don't. And so out of that, the big issue is always who's eligible to vote in tribal elections, who's eligible to vote for the Constitution and bylaws, and who's eligible to run for office in the tribe. And so depending on the tribe, you have different criteria. But nowhere is there a self-identity thing in any of this. Everyone on any of those rolls, undoubtedly, till about 1930, had two or three of the four grandparents were Indian, without any question at all.
So how does adoption and intermarriage factor into identity then and now?
There was a time you could be a total non-Indian and be adopted into a tribe and be a tribal member. Kansas Indians case went to the Supreme Court. Some of those tribes that were parties to that suit have been selling tribal memberships. So you say, wait a minute, what's going on here? I've run across cases where non-Indians were friendly local neighbors of Indians, and they were put on the rolls by a vote of the tribe. And they thereafter then they weren't Indians, but they were basically citizens of that tribe. And you had all kinds of problems when the five civilized tribes broke up, because a lot of these people were citizens of the five tribes, but not Indian blood. And so at points you had government intervention, and sometimes you didn't have government intervention. So now you get to IRA, and there are rolls where one twin is 3/4 and another twin is half. Same mother, same hospital, same day, and this is the Bureau's the Bureau statement. And I run across a lot of people into genealogy, and a lot of times the Bureau insists on its own version of the genealogy where it's obviously inaccurate. Uh, but then it would be a hassle with the tribal council to get this overturned, so people don't want to do it, or they do want to do it. Out in California, you have tribes trying to disenroll people so they'll get more money, the incumbent. It's just a bowl of spaghetti is what it is.
So with adoption and intermarriage factoring into identity, do certain elements of traditional forms exist in membership today and in
Certain what?
tribes?
There's certain elements of
Do certain elements of traditional forms of identity, of how Indian tribes identified before the IRA, do they exist today?
Yeah, there are a lot of tribes that have variants of IRA constitutions, and they're much more traditional. But the key to the Indian identity is, can you identify yourself with a specific Indian community? And that's always been the criteria. If you can go to Hope Villa, if you're a Hopi, and they say, yeah, we remember his family, then that's authentication. This works for almost all the tribes. During the real activist days, there were all these people running around shouting, you're an Indian if you think you are. And most of the people shouting were government undercover agents who were on these marches and things. So, when you see the self-identification brought in, that's only, looking at history, that's only good as long as no one challenges it. The minute that's challenged, then you really have to come up with some kind of proof that you had an Indian ancestor, and that's not always easy.
You can't fake this long, partner.